Well, thank you all for being here tonight. It's Thursday night of a week of our annual celebration. There have been several wonderful things happening already. A fantastic opening worship service. I guess maybe I'm biased if I say that. It was terrible watching myself preach, but other than that, it was a very moving service. I really appreciated it. There have been morning check-in devotions every morning that have been fantastic and varied. Last night, you heard the conference, my report from conference minister's report, as well as David Holston with the conference president's report. This Wednesday afternoon, we talked about, at our all conference chat, we talked about the 2022 budget specifically. Tonight, we're talking about financial transparency, about all of the financials that we have reported, and some conversation about the cleanup that has happened in the last 15 months or so, and the status of where we are now. And this has been a long time coming. You'll recall that it was in February 2020 when it became very clear that the conference was in some level of financial crisis, and we didn't know what that looked like. And it has taken us some time to sort through the ins and outs and separate all the pieces and parts to have a really clear picture. And it's now fairly clear picture of what our financial position is. We also have presented a budget, which will be voted on. Will be presented in the meeting tomorrow and will be voted on Saturday for 2022. But there's a whole lot more work that has been done with regard to resolve complexity and confusion in our financial situation. Early in my tenure, I was very clear that any of the financial reports that were being published were inaccurate. They were clearly inaccurate. And the decision was made to not share any of those reports until we were able to have a sense that the reports that we were getting were sort of accurate. So the first report the council started seeing was a cash flow report, just saying what's coming in and what bills are we paying. We've been able to extend that rewrote the budget. We did have a budget for this year. It was a deficit budget that was proposed and affirmed for 2021. It still looks like we're going to end the year with a deficit, but we had a plan on how we were going to address that, and hopefully maybe we won't. It is possible that we could end the year without a deficit. It all depends on our church's wider mission, OCWM. Historically, the largest amount of that comes in December. And so we're operating blind until the very, very end to know how it is that we've come out. This is not uncommon to those of you who work with your church budgets. It's the same thing is happening for you all. A lot of work has been done in the last year and a half. I particularly want to recognize Ernie Potter, who has been serving as the treasurer and has spent so many hours in the conference office, outside the conference office, doing so much cleanup, investigation, and work on his own time. We couldn't have done this without you, Ernie. Thank you so very much. We're also so very appreciative for Larry McCure, who has also volunteered so many hours to help with the filing and the organization and and reviewing documents and doing research, and has just put in so much time and effort into this. Can't go without acknowledging Bob Poor and the rest of the Financial Policy and Procedures Task Force, who didn't get started until August, September of this year, but met their November 1st deadline and have provided a first draft for the whole conference to review. We're collecting all of your input and questions, and then it'll go back to the task force for some editing and updating. Then it'll go to FAB, Finance, Administration, and Business, for recommendation to council for approval. Now, FAB has done a fabulous job. I know it doesn't stand for fabulous, but they have done a yeoman's effort this last year. They have done so much work of coming to terms with the challenges that we've been facing, with investigating, with taking leadership throughout the conference on what's going well and what needs to be done. David Holston, as conference president, has also played a very significant role in leadership of leading the conversation out to everyone, to leading the whole conference in an effort of keeping this front and center, and making sure also that we're not looking for scapegoats in this process. We're recognizing that things happened that led us to a difficult spot. And many, many, many people were involved in or have responsibility for how that ended up. And it has been a journey to get to where we are now. Just before I started, you may recall that we had hired a new accountant to work in the office. And after 2 weeks serving the Illinois conference, he submitted his resignation. And so before I got here, so between when I was called and when I arrived, we had hired and lost an accountant bookkeeper. And in that time, so one of my first tasks was to get on the ball and get us find Keith Clark-Hoyos, who has been immense help to us. And he's here with us tonight. He's actually located in Southern California. He has a long history working with conferences and with UCC churches. His entire ministry, he does have a history being an associate conference minister, and he's seminary trained, but his whole ministry, his whole call is about supporting churches with their finances and governance, which is exactly the place we're in. So it was always a pleasure to speak with Keith, who's like, yep, I've seen this before. Yep, we've made it through it before, and others have gone before and made it through to a healthy and happy outcome. And so as we're turning that corner, prayerfully turning that corner, here's the Illinois conference and feeling good about where we're at. I'm just deeply grateful for Keith and all he has brought to the table in the process. We have also reorganized our support staff, and Lynn Schindlin is now serving as our support staff for operations, and she plays a big role in our finances. It's all administrative. She's not in the accounting system at all, but she collects all of the approvals. She makes sure that the right account is assigned to each and every bill. She reviews each bill. She does sort of that front end processing to make it really possible and to improve our process along the way, so that we have separation of duties and other processes that really clean up all that we're doing and really live it into an ethical sort of way. Now, I've shared this a couple times in a couple of different settings, but I'm going to share my screen real quickly to show the website, the financial transparency website. This has been made available to the whole conference, whether you're registered or not to this event. It is password protected. So a slow mail letter went out to every church, and an email letter went out to the whole email list. So it's more than every church, and gave links to this. And there is a password. And the reason there's a password is not to keep it from, please share the password with anyone in the United Church of Christ in the Illinois Conference family. We just don't want it to be quite so easy for trolls or outside people to come straight through the internet to find this type of information. There are lots of information. There are links on all of these to the conference chat discussions, and you can review the recordings of all of those. After tonight, the link for tonight's conversation will be collected right here. We've set up a forum to receive your comments, questions, suggestions, and if you click on this link, we're interested in what you observe, what your questions are, what your thoughts are. We're going to be reviewing that after annual celebration as we review all of these documents. But this is in an effort of transparency throughout the conference as we're working to rebuild trust around our financial stewardship. So a little bit of history. This mission map video is a great video. I've done it twice, but the first time got broken in half and had to be edited. It wasn't edited together, right? And the second time it didn't record sound. So you'll have to wait for me to get to record it a third time. Third time's a charm. We have the statement of financial position, which is the first statement of financial position or balance sheet that was produced in my entire tenure, was produced 2 days before it was published on the site. We recognize, and there are a few areas that we know and we identify, and when you open this PDF, you'll see that there's some areas that are highlighted that are not yet fully resolved. And Keith will walk us through some of that stuff. The restricted funds, these are permanently restricted funds that have not been treated as permanently restricted funds in the past. This is an area where Ernie has done an immense amount of research to identify what the donors gave to these particular funds with these particular purposes, very specific purpose for each of these named funds. Donations were given for a particular purpose. We have reviewed all of those. We've done the best we possibly can to identify a minimum amount of funding that needs to be set up for each of those accounts. They're going to be set up individually and separately. They will be set up with an annual draw rate that will identify exactly how much we can withdraw from these accounts each year, and specifically what those dollars can be used for. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Then we have the draft of Financial Policies and Procedures Handbook. This, we finally have, we need to have policies and procedures, including a policy that says we need to review our policies every year, so that this becomes a living document that continues to guide, inform, and control our financial decision-making and processes. That we have a separate form for feedback on this because that will all go directly to the subcommittee that's working on these policies. So if you're able to use this link here to provide your feedback. We provided the 2021, as of the end of September, the actuals and budget so that you can see transparently all of the information. The narrative budget is completed, but the back end processing of, not that one, the back end processing of our website was slowed down a little bit. So you can see the detailed information. FAB earlier this week, saw the October numbers. And so we're now seeing the numbers and reviewing them, a full year-to-date report every month. And then 2022 budgets. These are the ones we'll be voting on at the end of the week. OCWM year-to-date reports as of the end of September. This is arguably more information than we should be sharing because it does include information for every single church and what we have reported in our system as having been given. We have received some feedback from individual churches that we're able to investigate. It's when you all tell us, we are the first ones to tell you that we make every effort not to make mistakes, and mistakes happen. When you give us feedback and you tell us, we investigate each and every piece of that feedback and get back to you as soon as we can with the resolution. And sometimes it's just that the one piece of information didn't get shared through, or there was a miscommunication somehow and misinterpretation of the report, or sometimes it just wasn't put in the right place. And
Molly, we're at 20 minutes now.
thank you. We'll talk a little bit about the audit. We're working on Realm, and we just provide this little document of a little bit of examples of the crazy that we found. So all of this information is available for you to review at your leisure. And I am going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to turn over to Keith to talk with us in a little more, with a little different perspective on the work that we've done over the last year and a half.
Good evening. When I was contacted by Molly and we began looking at financial reports, it was clear that there were several challenges. As I flew out to Illinois and met with Ernie and David Holston and others, and started asking questions and looking at the actual accounting system, the questions, the number of questions grew and the complexity of the challenges grew. It's been an honor and a privilege to work with your leadership, who have worked very hard and have made every effort to expedite how we get from where we were to where we are. The key word I've shared all year long has been inconsistent. What we discovered in the system, first of all, I would say we have not come across anything that we would say is malfeasance. We do have some things that happened that shouldn't have happened, and funds were misappropriated. The challenge that we found, the primary challenge that we found was that accounting was done inconsistently for a very long period of time. The reporting that was being received by various committees was not what was not being generated directly out of the system, and so communication to various committees became inconsistent as to what was happening. And as we dug into the accounts and started going line by line through each account, we started seeing that entries were made inconsistently, and many entries were being made during the audit process. So it made it very challenging to track down each and every piece. We did go through each account and we looked at things. We still have a few accounts we need to dig deeper into, and I'll highlight those as we look at your statement of financial position. And not everything could be answered to the level of detail that we would love to have been able to have answered the questions. And so we had to make some tough decisions about how to move forward. And I think that the leadership has, both FAB and the Conference Council, have done everything they could to dig into that detail that we had, and have made some decisions that there were disagreements, and people are still probably a little unsettled with some of what is there, but I think that we've made good progress. I'll start by sharing, I'm going to share my screen and show you that statement of financial position. This is the September 30th statement of financial position that is on the website. And you'll see different things highlighted on this that'll give you notes. So you've got a big block in green and some things highlighted in orange and some notes off to the side. I'll just highlight a few pieces in regards to this. First, this is 4 pages long in a layout that is landscape. It was probably twice this long a year ago. We had numerous accounts that were a part of this report that had entries made at some point, but then the account was kind of left with no activity or very unclear activity. And I presented to your leadership numerous accounts that we needed to eliminate, and we went through those and eliminated many accounts in the system. We wrote off, I believe, it was just about $300,000 in the assets section, and some of that also was a liability. We had internal loans and things that had been there for decades prior to the accounting system. And those were clearly things that weren't going to, that needed to just be eliminated. But we also eliminated some assets that had disappeared, and when I say disappeared, a bank account had been closed, but the final entry in the system hadn't been done. It wasn't that money was money had disappeared. It was that the inconsistent accounting didn't account for something that had actually happened. And we had several items like that. We also wrote off several equity accounts where we had made some sort of entry over the course of the last 20 years that identified a certain amount of the equity in the organization to be specific to a particular fund, and then never made any entry to that equity account when there was actually an expenditure of those funds. So that happened in many of these accounts. So a fund might have been set up for a project, and the income and expense for that project was accounted for within the general operating fund or one of the camp funds, and the activity never reached or changed that equity account. The money was spent, but the financial reports reflected as though they still existed. The section here, I'll just pin a couple of these things. The association investments, that's an area that we still need to review and look at, try to figure out exactly what we have. There are some details we need to still sort out. The area in green, this is the new layout of how we're tracking the restricted funds. We're going to talk about that in a little more depth. But this section, what we did is we recognized that we needed to establish the correct balance for each of these and track each of them separately so that we don't have any confusion in the future as to the activity in each particular restricted fund. So those were all segregated out. We've got further down some other things where you'll see that this grant's going to be written off, working on a couple of things. So there's a little bit of detail there. And then in the other assets, you see some notes about sale pending and some other pieces of information. But where we get down to directed giving miscellaneous, and this one being highlighted, this is an account where gifts to various agencies that aren't already identified in one of these accounts was put, and that money still needs to be sent on to those organizations. The equity accounts, or what this system refers to as net asset accounts, right? So that's another term that's used for that. We have a few highlighted that still need to be further analyzed to ensure that we have those correct. We've done a lot of work to clean up several of them, but this is a few that still need to be cleaned up and worked out. The next piece, do we want to look at that? Molly, do you want to look specifically at the restricted funds next?
Sure. Why don't you pull those up and
Okay.
give a little bit of information?
So as we looked at the restricted funds, we knew how much money we had invested at United Church Funds. But as I said, the equity accounts that were listed on the financial report weren't necessarily impacted by activity. Additionally, we had a transfer of income from those funds being transferred into the general operating fund without clear direction as to which of those funds that were all pulled together in one of them, which of those were actually being spent. And we had restrictions that needed to be met to spend those funds. And so that created a lot of confusion about, well, which funds have been being spent and on what, because that money was just being transferred over to the general operating banking account on a quarterly basis. We stopped that a year ago and began investigating these. As you heard, your treasurer spent a great deal of time going back, I think, 30 years, looking at audit reports, looking at the notes that the auditors put in those reports, and looking through the detail that we could find. One of the challenges that we have is that we don't have a lot of detail files on each of these. We have found some, but not the kind of detail that we should have in the filing. A group of people early on came in and began going through all the files. Ernie and Larry were mentioned as part of that team, and they went through to reorganize the files in the office so that we would have a better tracking of historical documents and more easily be able to identify what we do and don't have in the way of the details on each of these. The challenge with these funds, because of the inconsistency in the accounting over the last 10 to 15 years, is that it is obvious based on the purposes of these funds that funds were spent for restricted purpose, but it wasn't clearly identified in the accounting entries. We operate under different accounting rules now since 2008 in relation to restricted funds. And so some of these funds go back quite far. And so trying to determine exactly what the correct balance should be was an impossibility with the information that we had. We had some basis of looking at it by looking at the audit reports, specifically some older audit reports, and we had to come to some decisions. The challenge around this is there is no way to answer the question completely accurately, and that's an uncomfortable place to be. And so we looked at what needed to be in those funds as a minimum to meet the original donation. And in the case of funds that we did have segregated out in a different investment, we were able to obviously see exactly where we were with those. And so the proposal that went to your leadership regarding these was to create these as separate investment accounts and fund them with what was determined to be the minimum, which was what we knew was in the account because it was segregated out, or what the original contribution was. That process allows us now to move forward in a more transparent and accurate way to identify each of these separate restricted funds, their purpose, and identify how those funds will be managed individually rather than in a pool, so that we don't have any activity that impacts funds that shouldn't be impacted. And so this went, and there was a lot of discussion around how we should do this, and we based the decision on the best information we had, and chose to move forward with a minimum funding of each of these to ensure that we had met the obligation of the original donations. So all of these now are going to be segregated out on your statement of financial position, and they are invested in separate investment accounts so that those are tracked more accurately moving forward. Your FAB committee is working on a policy for draw rate, and we discussed that this last week, and we're going to establish a draw rate for the future, and we will track each of those individually.
Keith, let's spend about 5 more minutes on this and then go to the budget, please.
I was ready to go to the budget. I see there's some questions in here. We're going to
let 'em
deal
go.
with those after, correct?
Right. Yeah, let's
Okay.
go to the budget.
All right, so we're going to move over to the budget for 2022, and this is your proposed budget for the general operating fund. Let me increase the size a little bit, try to make that a little easier to read. The primary source of income for the Illinois Conference, like many, is our church's wider mission. This is the bulk of income generation source for any conference. Your conference leadership is looking at other options and opportunities to enhance that, augment that, and over the next several years, you're going to see other possible opportunities for income generation. But our church's wider mission will probably always be the greatest portion of income for any conference. In addition to that, you see Mission Friends. You can see that the Mission Friends giving is budgeted at a larger amount than it has received in the current year. The anticipation is that the focus for 2022 is going to be much greater on that income generation for Mission Friends. And there's a lot of things in the works with your financial development committee as to moving forward with that. And there's also some anticipation of some property sale proceeds that would support the general operating fund in 2022. Expenses. I think the thing I would highlight, because you'll have the opportunity to look at this, you continue to budget and send to the national setting 20% of what is given to our church's wider mission. The other piece that I would highlight on here is that your expenses for 2022 are budgeted significantly lower than anticipated in 2021. The biggest contribution to that is the staffing restructure and the intentional effort to structure the staff in a way that's going to best meet the needs of the conference. The budget for 2022 is a balanced budget for the general operating fund. We have a Tower Hill budget and a Pilgrim Park budget separate. The Tower Hill budget is also a balanced budget. Your outdoor ministry committee has been working very hard to really work towards income generation through fundraising, but also through utilizing the property in new ways. Obviously, the last 2 years have been very unusual with our pandemic and the challenges around that. There's an anticipation we're going to see a great deal of activity and opportunity at both of our camps in 2022.
Thanks, Keith. I think that's really helpful. Maybe it would be, I think maybe we're at a good time to switch gears and address some of the questions
Exactly.
coming up in the group. I did not give questions early on, and there's a Q&A function on this webinar. Those of you who are on the screen where it says mute and start video and all that, there's one that says Q&A, and you can type your questions into that area, and the moderators of our group will be able to, we'll raise those questions to the panel here, and we'll do our best to answer.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can.
So, the first question, I'm not sure, I'll just read it, okay? See if you're able. Please see and address the questions. This is, I will identify the person because it says I, so it's from Jeffrey Phillips. I raised on my feedback form number 13 submitted on November 12th. Regarding my first question, this is not about scapegoating, but about telling the truth that leads to understanding, accountability, lessons learned for the future, and most importantly, opportunities for confession, forgiveness, reconciliation, and trust, which makes everything else possible. I'm not sure how that works out as a question, but I will just leave it as is.
I haven't seen the form you submitted yet. I don't know that any of us have seen that yet. But I think that to the spirit of the question, as far as accountability, as the outside consultant looking in, the responsibility it falls with a large number of people. It falls with leadership. We can very easily look at the accounting staff. You had multiple staff previously that were involved with the accounting, and we can say they did these entries wrong. They didn't follow through on this. The accounting was done inconsistently. A large portion of the accounting was done during the audit process. We can look at all of those pieces, and we could easily say, oh, well, it's that person. At the same time, we have to recognize that the governing body and the finance committee have a responsibility to hold those people accountable, to establish policy and procedure and audit that policy and procedure to make sure that it's happening. And we have to confront those issues. I know that we've talked about this at length. Several of the people in your current leadership and past leaders did confront things, but the process wasn't in place to address all of the questions, and there was some challenges with how conversations took place and how the organization as a total, right, dealt with the conflicts and the timeline for corrective action. I think that several of your current leaders worked really hard to move to the position where we could actually see what was wrong and dig in deep. What I would say to that, though, more importantly, in my opinion, is that leadership has learned where we fell short in a lot of these areas, and the leadership has spent the last year not only investigating things, looking for the specifics, but also looking at the bigger picture, the policy, the procedure, and establishing better controls. Interim ones were put in place. And I will tell you that your treasurer is in the office every week looking at every single document that is being paid, looking through files, digging deep into the insurance and trying to correct those pieces, and looking at everything that I'm doing as the accountant, generating the reports, questioning those things, and others on the FAB committee have stepped up and dug into those as well. Larry McCure has been very involved. And so the level of ownership has dramatically changed. And the magnifying glasses all came out, and that's great. We had policies previously. They were in need of being updated. And they, like I said before, you can't just have policy, you have to actually audit that they're taking place. And that's where changes happened in this last year.
The next question is, sorry, go ahead.
I want to add a little bit to that, to give you some idea of what you people can do, members of the United Church of Christ in the Illinois Conference. I think 5 years ago was the first annual celebration that I've attended in a number of years. And at that meeting, the financial information that was allowed to be presented was about 10 minutes worth of information. After it was over, there were some questions that I thought I had in my mind as to things that I was not comfortable with that was being presented to the group. And I questioned the FAB chairman after the meeting and basically was told, don't worry about it, it's all taken care of. And I decided at that time that was not being taken care of. And I went to the Eastern Association and said, how about putting me on the FAB committee so that I have a chance to look at that? And with that, had a good amount of influence on me and my participation in the FAB committee and being willing to accept the position as treasurer 2 years ago. You need to understand my background, though, I'm a CPA, and I've spent over 50 years as an outside auditor. So there were things that I didn't like, I didn't see, and there are still things that I have not been satisfied with. We have still a long ways to go. You're being presented with some information that I'm not comfortable with. I'm quite honest with you. But I'm pointing this out so that you understand that if you've got some questions, you need to be involved in some of the committee work that's being done in the Illinois Conference. You can't stand on the outside and complain. You got to get on the inside and make your voice heard and understand what's going on. And then you can carry that information that you got from being on the inside out to other members of the Illinois Conference and the United Church of Christ.
We have a two-part question here. I'll take it as a two-part question. Also, this person has their hand raised. I don't know how the moderators would like to take that. The first
We're not
question,
going to take hand raising. They can just ask the question in the Q&A.
thank you for the clarification. Has anyone taken a stab at 2021 expected results? I know OCWM is very fuzzy, but expenses should be estimatable. And then I will hold up for the second question after your response.
We have not specifically done that. However, we've been watching as the expenses are unfolding, and we have a very good sense of where we are compared to where we're going to be. The vast majority of our expenses are pretty fixed because they're payroll related. And we know where we're going to end up with that. The biggest questions about our end of year situation have come on the income side.
And then the second part of that is what are the yes aspects of the 2022 budget? So I think maybe what are the expectations of the 2022 budget, if I am correct? I hope I'm understanding that
Not
question.
clear on what that question means.
I'll answer that partially though. The 2021 budget, again, a lot depends in December because a lot of our OCWM does come in December. But we've met with the camps, for example, this year and told them that they had to make their budget, either make the revenue and expenses, or they were going to have to take some of the money out of their funds in order to make sure the budget was balanced. So they were not going to get any help from us. And they have done a fantastic job of working toward that, increasing their revenue, controlling their expenses. And it would appear that they're at the end of the year going to become very, very close. Tower Hill is actually positive in the black at this point for the year and is anticipating being black at the end of the year in terms of being financial. That's a term for better than being in the red. The red means you have a deficit. Pilgrim Park is struggling, but the next 2 months are their strongest months, and we expect that they will end the year strong. The conference, just quite frankly, depends upon OCWM. And December in your churches is when your money comes in, and in our churches and in our conference is the same thing. So we are watching that. But you'll notice there's two other areas besides OCWM. One is the Mission Friends. And one of the things that very quickly I'll mention is that Mission Friends, 100% of that money goes to the conference. OCWM, 80% goes to the conference and 20% goes to national. So we have the opportunity, if we're able to get some donations outside of OCWM, we don't want you to replace that, to bring money directly into the conference. And unfortunately, we have some opportunities because we have 8 churches that we own that we're in the process of selling some of these. We have the opportunity to bring some additional revenue. That is at best a short-term solution because we'd like to use that money for other purposes. But it allows us to be able to buy a little more time while we monitoring our expenses. We have a number of churches this year that have done a very good job of sending money in during the year and not waiting until December, and that has helped us to get to this point. We also have an outstanding stewardship committee led by Reverend Melody Seaton that is working on stewardship opportunities to be able to work with churches on bringing OCWM. So I think we've made some good progress in that area. Those are systematic things that we can do as well.
I think also we need to, that's a good time now to make people understand the OCWM that's coming in. In the past, the books have been left open till like March the 15th to take in the year's contribution. Yep. And that did not happen this last year. They were cut off on the 15th of January. And so a lot of the OCWM that the respective churches wanted for 2020 actually got recorded in 2021 because it came in after the cutoff. And it's a good, this is a good time to make sure you understand that your OCWM to be counted for 2021 has to be postmarked before January the 10th, I think is the cutoff date that Keith is using. So right. I know in our particular church, we submit it once a quarter, And it just means that we have to get that check cut in that first week of the new year so that we can get it recorded for this last year. So some of you are going to see your giving for 2021 being higher than what you'd anticipated because you've got some income from 2020 that's in the 2021 period.
I'll just add to what Ernie just said about that, explain why we made that change. The national setting has to close their books, and it's required that we forward on all of the OCWM that is the 20% of OCWM given for the current year, as well as special offerings, has to be there before their cutoff date. That wasn't happening in the past, and so the activity that was going into the yearbooks was not in line with what churches thought they were doing. If they sent that final check in March, it wouldn't have made it to the national setting in time. So we're just trying to ensure that we can close the books in a timely manner, both for the Illinois Conference and the national setting.
Let me jump in on this before we go any further and assure everybody that our full intention tonight is to answer every question in the Q&A. We are not rushing this meeting. So you continue to ask your questions. We are intentionally, as a panel, not answering the questions until they are asked by the co-host, because that way we make sure everything gets handled properly. So continue to ask your questions, and we'll continue to do our best to respond to them. Next question.
Next question. Would you please expand on Realm? It's been mentioned, and information on what it is. How will it benefit the conferences, churches, etc.? Would be appreciated by those not yet familiar with Realm.
Realm is a church management system. Many of your churches use something similar, whether it's church windows or, there's just a million of these. Realm integrates or is able to integrate our financial system, which is actually we're using a supplementary product from ACS, which is the company that's called ACS Financials, which is their legacy product. It does interconnect with the Realm database. Realm will keep track of all of our clergy, our churches, all our contacts. It was originally designed as a communication tool. So right now our volunteers are calling to make sure our data is as clean as possible. So we have not had a good list of who all our churches are or how to be in touch with them. Our email lists are incomplete and inaccurate, and this is an opportunity that we're taking to clean it up. All of our directories and all of our committee groups will all be organized in Realm, which is it's a customer relations management database. We can track all of our files digitally, so all of our clergy files and all of our church files can be attached to the individual profiles in Realm, which makes accessibility of all of this information much easier and more rapid for our staff, for the ACMs who are out in the field, for our committees on ministry, for those processes that need access to those different files. We are in the process of digitizing all of our files, and again, that's another piece towards it slows things down in the process, but it will speed things up in the long term. It'll make the information more accessible, more easily accessible to all of those of us who need it. It also will reduce the amount of real estate we need to store filing cabinets. Realm does interconnect with the financial side, and so we are converting to ACS Financials to maintain all of our accounting. It will also track all of our donors. Will be connected in with this updated database we have in Realm. So all of our donations, OCWM, Mission Friends, all of the tracking We can do registrations through the system. We can do, it's a robust system. There are many, many, many aspects that we will be able to use to streamline the operations and have all those pieces that are located in different places will all be centrally located in a single spot. I hope that helps.
Well, Molly, I'm gonna jump in for just a second, just to keep our meeting going. And for the next couple of minutes, Eric and John direct the questions to me, and I'll start with the answer. And the reason I'm saying that is because, unlike Ernie, I'm not a CPA, but I am a person who's been involved in 40 years with turnaround management. And like Ernie, I was concerned with the answers I was getting over the last 10 years. And that's why I became conference president, if you will, is because I went to my association and said, I think I can help the conference. And so my perspective is a little different from an overall management point of view, but I have the same interest Ernie has in getting this thing done. I wish it was all done today. I'm not happy with every answer I get, but I, like Ernie, push to get the answers because I know it's a process. And when you have a process, it's a marathon, not a run. And sometimes in the marathon, you have to come and go. And so we're working on that. So what's the next question?
The next question is, has the Illinois Conference staff thought about the following? A, looking into annual spending of restricted funds administered by the Western Association, Fox Valley, Prairie, and Eastern Associations, with Western Association Leanhart Fund being the largest. And B, determine whether or not a request to subdivide one or more of these funds between the associations and the conference to help, if needed, to balance the 2022 budget at the end of the year.
The short answer is no. The short answer is that's illegal. They're restricted funds. We cannot touch restricted funds. That's what got us in trouble to begin with. We don't intend to touch them. We, in fact, have gone the opposite way and separated them out recently so that those funds are being managed separately and are not touched. We will use a portion of those funds for the purpose for which they were intended, but that's it. Next question.
How are the trust funds invested? Could they
With
be
UCF. With UCF. They're all invested with UCF. Kudos to Ernie, who watches that very carefully. We're getting our maximum return on that. We've had some good returns. I don't know, Ernie, what's the return this year so far?
I honestly don't have those figures with me right now, but the market value changes quite a bit. And for example, we lost $3,000, I think it was, in the month of October on the market funds. And in the month of, must have been September, we lost 3,000. In the month of October, we gained 33,000. So there's wide fluctuations in there. And it's a moderate fund, roughly 60% is in equity and 40% is in fixed incomes.
Thank you, Ernie.
It's done very good for us.
Yep, it has. Let me tell you, we're very happy with, and we leave it alone. Ernie tells us what to do. We shake our head and say, yes, sir. Next question.
Next question, it can be either taken as a question or a statement. I'll leave it at that. Can you perhaps further explain to people that these funds were often not separate freestanding accounts, but were often all in one big fund with just separate line items for each fund?
That is essentially true, not completely true, but essentially true. Most of these were in a few accounts. Again, as I just mentioned, we've taken all of the accounts that were set aside for specific things restricted and now broken them out. But we also had two accounting systems, which made things more difficult as well. And that's what Keith mentioned. We've gone to with Realm, we're going to, or Molly mentioned, we're going to one system with Realm. And now we will be managing in our general fund those funds that are not restricted. Anything that's restricted is out separately by itself and will not be used. Next question.
Are all our churches aware of the January 10th cutoff date?
We have attempted to communicate both on our webpage and by sending emails and letters out. Where we might have failed is if we don't have the correct address. The associations are well aware of it, the moderators and the vice moderators, and hopefully they are helping us. We're doing our best to communicate to those that we can. I don't know of any other way to do it. Next question.
The next question is about Realm and when will it roll to the local churches? About 2 years ago, the interim conference minister presented that the program will be available for local churches, but the rollout has been delayed.
Don't you love how interims tell you they're going to do something and then they take off? and I'm just picking on Husto. We've done a pretty good job with that, but it's going to be available for the churches when they decide they want to pay for it. They can do it right now. This is not something the conference will pay for. If you want to have that package at your church, we can give you the contact information and you can contact them directly. But we expect to turn it on to where we will be able to use it, a great deal of it starting in January. Not all of it, by the way. It will take some time. Any kind of a software package takes some time because you have to integrate what you have and what you're going to get. And again, we're appreciative of the 18 volunteers who spent most of the last 2 months calling churches, getting addresses, verifying who the pastors were, verifying who the treasurer for that church was, so that we can start with good updated information as best we can get.
I think one of the things, and you're right, John, on the fact that that was 2 years ago, because that was what we projected. And when we first talked about the Realm program, it was first came out of FAB committee was for the financial reporting. But there were people then on the committee, as well as other people in the leadership of the conference, that decided that there was the financial position, statement of financial position was so far off that we didn't want to put it into the Realm program until we had it straightened out. So that's when Molly started using that to get the context, because we were using different software programs in a lot of the different associations and couldn't get them to communicate together. So that's why that's the part that Molly's working with now. But the financial one, the goal is to be in there on the 1st of January, but I'm still not comfortable at this particular time to go in there unless we're willing to admit that we've got some more adjustments that need to be made to get it out of there.
As Ernie says, we know we still have a few adjustments to make. I would be disappointed if Ernie was happy all the time, because that's not his job. And I don't make that, I'm not making fun of him when I say that. I am so happy that we have somebody that can do what he does, because I am not a CPA. What's our next question?
What elements of Realm will be available to the public or congregations with a password? e.g., will the same committees in the different associations have access to directories?
I'm going to let Molly answer that question.
The short answer is I don't know. The directories will be available and they will be created, and I don't know if they're going to be available by having access directly into Realm, or they will be distributed like they have before, but the data will all be extracted from Realm. There are still areas of this I don't, that we're still trying to operationalize. And it's been a long, slow process.
A lot of that is going to be the learning process that we're all going to have. I have attended a couple of pilot sessions of it myself. I know it's web-based, and I know once you have access, you can get some good information on your church. So we will be talking a lot about that through our, one of the things I would encourage you to do, I'll put a plug in for our Wednesday afternoon sessions that we'll have in January, February. Join us at that 3 o'clock time, because I suspect we're going to be talking a lot about Realm in January and February on those calls. What's our next question?
I am just going to read this, and I am quoting this quote. I want to push back on the sentiment that people cannot question our financial situation unless they are a part of the quote inner circle. Is it not part of the reason why we ended up in the mess we did? There needs to be a fraction of grace to the conference members who are willing to ask questions for clarification, but are not very familiar with accounting practices. Only because people don't participate in committees should not be a reason not to answer their questions. End quote.
I absolutely agree. And if we gave you that impression, I apologize. We apologize because it's not our intent. But I think what Ernie's point was, we need more people to serve. If we can get more people to help on some of these committees, then you don't have the same people, because what's happening in the past, if you start to look, the average age, for example, on one of the committees I serve on right now is around 85. Those people have served for a long, long time, and it's time we get some new blood and some new people. But I'm not an accountant either. And so absolutely, you should question. Absolutely. That's why we're having this meeting tonight, is we want you to question. But let's not wait until the last minute or until it's too late. You should be able to ask your association in your association meetings these questions. I'll push back there. Your associations have these things, like your moderators and your vice moderators have this information because they attend the conference meetings. You should be reviewing this in your meetings. You should be asking those questions then, and then they can bring it back to us as well. Does that make sense? I mean, you don't have to chat me. I mean, to me, that makes sense. So that's how we do this, is more, and Ernie's point and my point is, let's all participate sooner rather than later. So if we gave you an impression otherwise, no, we absolutely want to ask your questions. And there's no such thing as a stupid question, only a stupid answer. And that's what I do. Next question.
That's it so far.
Oh, surely we couldn't have answered them all.
I mean, I could ask more questions if you want, but
No, again, good questions. Thank you for asking those questions, because we do want to know that.
The person who who I just quoted that last says, "Thank you, David, on your response."
Well, thank you, because again, you are the folks that are making this happen, and we serve you. Keith, Molly, Ernie, myself, I can tell you we have spirited discussions. We don't always agree either, but that's what keeps us tuned, and that's what keeps us getting better. And we have made good progress. And sometimes we agree in the United Church of Christ to disagree, right? I see a couple Q&As, looks like they came in.
There was another comment just saying, "Thank you all for a very informative session." We also have one person still raising, or now two people raising their hands, but you are pushing them to the Q&A portion of this.
Yeah, we really need you to go to the Q&A. When we have this many people in a meeting, it's very important that we use this function. I have been told that we'll use the function or I'll get spanked. Now, you can come tomorrow night to my coffee hour at 7 o'clock and ask me directly or say anything directly you want to me. That'll be a very open session. There'll be no limits on that one.
we have just a response. Thanks to all for a very informative session.
A new question that has just come across: can I assume our head of finance is being informed, or should I pass on what I heard tonight to her? Also, I am not a CPA.
I'm not sure what that question is leading to. We don't have a new person of finance. I do see a question on here, though, that wasn't asked by Sally Schweib.
May I'll take a stab at that. We do not have contact information for the financial leadership of each individual church. That changes every year, and we, as the conference, is not generally notified. And so this is the opportunity to take this information that we're sharing and share it widely throughout your churches. This is an effort at transparency about all things about the conference finances. We will continue to accept questions. My email is mollycarlson@ilucc.org. I do my best to respond to all of them or get any questions to the right person who would be able to answer them.
It's my understanding that we're recording this tonight and will be available for other people to go back and get it. So I think that should be the answer for the person that raised that last question, that they can sit down with their director of finances and listen to this program that we did tonight.
Another question that has just come across is, do you feel the procedures put into place can be handled by a limited staff?
Yes. They have to be.
Well, and the procedures put in place are not just for staff. As Ernie mentioned earlier, a lot of these have to do with how council operates, with how FabCop operates, with how people who are involved, and that's more than one group. And part of your checks and balances systems when everybody holds each other accountable. And that's one of the things we're going to do. I used the example earlier of, I hear somebody on. Can you mute whoever that is? Somebody asked about the camps and what, and you know, why we're doing what we're doing, having them stand alone. Well, the reason is we have to hold them accountable. If we're going to have self-sustaining camps, then they're going to have to be in a position of breaking even, because the conference can no longer subsidize that. I mean, we're having trouble with our own accounts. So those are the types of things that we're trying to do, holding each other accountable. Those are parts of the checks and balances. I can tell you, Ernie has held up more than one check signing because he didn't think we were following the policy. And guess what? He was right. And so, you know, we need to make sure we're doing that. And I think we're doing a pretty good job of that.
I think the other thing to answer your question is, yes, we have a small staff, in which creates some problems with internal controls. That's why some of these internal controls are being accepted by the officers and also by the FAB committee. So just because we have a small staff doesn't mean our internal controls change. It just means that we have to come up with new internal controls to make sure that they're working right.
Looks like a couple people are trying to enter questions, but they're not either being answered or not showing up. But one question that or one comment that just came across that you could address is, and I'm quoting, with the constant changes in church leadership, such as moderator, trustees, chair, pastors, etc., I would think the lay representatives of the church may be a good choice for relaying information back to the churches.
Absolutely. And that's one of the advantages we hope to come up with the realm system, is we will have the ability to put in not just the pastor's name, but the conference, or not the conference, the council president or the treasurer, and we'll be able to send them information as well. In the past, we didn't always have that information, but understand, we have to get that information. We can't just pull it out of a hat. We have to know who your treasurer is. We have to know who your council president is. We have to make sure that the pastors aren't withholding that information to us, or the churches. And so if you can help us, we can help you.
One question I will push, and we may have already answered this as well. One area which has concerned me is that we have listed the camps as something that OCWM supports, but we are asking the camps to be self-supporting. Are we opening another can of worms? I am referring to information sent to others and to me by the conference about OCWM.
Go ahead, Ernie. I see your finger.
Okay, I'll answer that. You have to realize that the two camps are part of the Illinois Conference. And because of that, we have a joint, we have a separate budget for each one of the camps, but we also bring those in to coordinate in the overall budget of the Illinois Conference. We operate the camps as separate enterprises, and we do Tower Hill as one enterprise, and also Pilgrim Park is another one. And we have in the past, the Illinois Conference operating fund has subsidized any shortage that the camps have had. This year, we've made some changes in that, and the fact that we're asking the camps to take and make their own subsidies up. And that's what we're talking about on some of these monies being pulled out of their separate funds that they have with United Church Fund. But I'm a very much of a camp person. I have worked at Tower Hill with youth groups for a number of years, back 40 years ago, Pilgrim Park. And it's important to understand what those camps are. And they're part of the religious training that we have. But the thing is that the concept and the people that attend those camps have changed drastically in the last 50 years. And that's difficult for this old guy to understand and to be willing to accept, because he knows how important it was to him and also to his kids when they participated, and also the junior high and the high school kids that we took to those camps to help work and do stuff. I mean, I still go back and still have the kids when they come back to church, sit and what do they talk about? They talk about what we did when we went to Pilgrim Park to do some work retreats. And we would go on a Friday night and we'd leave Sunday afternoon, and we prepared all of our own meals, and we just had a good time and contributed work that needed to be done at those camps.
Thank you, Ernie. We just realized that some of the Q&As were going to the top of the screen and we were looking at the bottom of the screen. So we'll try to make sure we answer a couple of those questions. Go ahead, John. I think I know which one you're going to ask next.
Many of us who have been asked to vote on issues, but we are not accountants. We do not necessarily know the questions to ask. Is there a way for people to be educated so that they may know what to look for in order to ask intelligent questions?
Very good question, Sally, and thank you for that question. Again, I'm not an accountant either, but over the years, I've learned more about the accounting systems because I had to. But that's one of the reasons we have sessions like we're having tonight. We want you to ask the questions. Primarily tonight, the more important part of it was the budget, the revenue and the expenses. And believe you me, you may not be the accountant, but there are other people on the call who know a lot more about accounting, and they have the ability to ask the questions. And if you're like me, you listen and you learn and you get a little more out of it. Most of our budgets, our budget, is very similar to the budget you'll have at a church. There's going to be income, what you think you're going to get. There's going to be expenses, what you think you're going to spend. And I can tell you that our expenses this year are below our budget, but so is our revenue. And so we watch it every month. And new council members get an education on accounting very fast when they come in. If you have a specific question, feel free to email Molly or myself. I'm going to ask you not to email Keith because we don't want Keith answering those questions. We want to be able to do that ourselves and keep Keith doing what he's supposed to be doing.
With the constant changes in church leadership, such as moderator, trustee, chair, pastor, etc., I would think the lay representatives of the churches may be a good choice for relaying information back to the church.
Yep, that was a good question mentioned a few minutes ago as well. And again, as we integrate Realm, hopefully we'll get that information. If you want a lay person in your church to get the information, you can also contact the office in Westchester and ask to be put on the mailing list, and we'll be more than happy to put you on the mailing list.
We have one of our camp directors, I believe, on here saying our camps also benefit from the support and expertise of the MLT, FAB, etc. And then I have another question asking, are the camps individual 501c3?
No, they operate under the auspice of the Illinois Conference.
I want to ask this one. This is wonderful. Thanks for this great information session. Can I borrow Ernie to help with straightening out our trustee board?
You have to stay in line.
I know.
Ernie is always willing to go up and meet with a church council to sit down with them on a one-night thing and explain the financial records and what needs to be done. And all you have to do is make sure we can get it on my schedule, and I'd be happy to come and meet with them.
And Ernie has done that, by the way. He's helped us on a lot of individual churches. I don't know how the guy does it. As a matter of fact, we keep on saying, watch it, you'll fall off a ladder or something. And sure enough, he eventually does. I see a question by Sally Scheib. One of you want to read that to us, please? That wasn't answered.
That
Take
up top.
Yeah, take that one, John.
It starts with my question wasn't.
My question wasn't about or whether camps should be self-supporting, but should we then say that we are supported by OCWM?
And I believe you're probably correct, Sally, in that they are not currently supported by OCWM directly. They are self-sufficient. In the past, up till this year, we were supporting them. We actually provided money to them as part of a grant, for lack of a better word, every year. We weren't able to do that this year because of our deficit. So if we continue to follow that practice, which is likely, we will want to correct that on the webpage if that's where it is. So thank you for that.
I don't think I would
point out,
classify that as a grant that we gave to them. I think it was a situation where we just subsidized whatever their shortage was.
You're right. Yeah, thank you, Ernie. That's correct.
I would also point out what Tracy just pointed out a minute ago, that the camps are supported by the MLT, by FAB, by various committees. And as we pointed out, most of the OCWM dollars are used to support or are to fund staff. And so my meeting with the camp directors every month, the other work that is done to support them through like Keith's work to help with the budgeting, those pieces do come through OCWM dollars. So it may not look like direct support, but it is certainly an important part of the way that we support our camps through our OCWM dollars.
I'm going to jump in on the question that was just asked. I know I'm supposed to wait for you guys to ask it, but I think it's important to answer this question right now. Somebody asked, what do ODM and MLT mean? ODM is outdoor ministries. That's our camps. And MLT is the management leadership team. That would be Molly and your associate conference minister. So thank you for that question. We sometimes forget that not everybody knows that.
And just with that, it would be helpful if individual churches were educated about best financial practices.
Excellent point.
Mm-hmm.
I believe one of the, sorry, Molly.
Keith and his organization offers several online training courses that are available for not a lot of expense to local churches. And we've sent out that information before, and we can, of course, send that out again.
I want to point out a quote that Kathy Laws just posted: MLT, ministry leadership team, not management.
Yep.
Well, they manage too, but you're right.
There's another post here, I believe a member of ODM, I could be wrong because I haven't been on a board in a while. There was indeed an annual contribution from the conference to the camps regularly in the budgets. When the deficits became apparent a few years back, in was taken off and all listed as one, but it was indeed a grant annually at one time.
Thank you. Thank you. Other questions?
This may have been asked, but will there be more responsibilities keeping the procedures by the association councils?
The association accounts are one of those areas that still need further investigation. Most of the financial decisions that are managed by the associations will remain in the hands of the associations, and there will end up being some procedures in terms of how we are tracking those effectively, and as they haven't been tracked particularly well and not integrated into the full accounting system. So that's an area of concern that still needs to be much more fully investigated.
We are being asked to please supply contact info for churches to contact Keith.
As I said, that's something we would prefer not to do. Keith is on contract with us. If you have a question for financial stuff, you should contact Molly or your associate conference minister, and we will do our best to respond. You can also contact me. but we don't want Keith spending his time, and this has happened, receiving and fielding calls. So no, we're not going to give you that information. I'll just say that straight up. We're not going to do that.
We will publish in our e-blast access to where to find Keith, those online courses that Keith offers. They're pre-recorded and they can be accessed by anybody directly.
I'm not sure if this is in direct of a question or if she's trying to get questions in, but Christine is saying, I just do not know how I can get in. I'm not sure if this is about a question she's trying to ask or maybe how to join a board or something in general.
I think
Clarification.
I saw a couple of questions from her early on. We attempted to answer one of them. I think the second one, we weren't clear on what it meant. The two questions that I saw listed, one is, has anybody taken a stab at 2021 expected results? And Molly answered that question, that we haven't analyzed what we think we're going to finish off the year at. Currently, we're, as far as expenses are concerned, we're about $100,000 under budgeted expenses year to date. But we anticipate we're going to be right about where we expected to be. We have some things that are higher than we expected when we did the budgeting process, and we've done our best to control costs where we had the ability to. The second question, I think this is one that we were having trouble reading, but I think it says, what are the squishiest aspects of the 2022 budget? I don't think there's a whole lot of squishy in there. We narrowed down the expenses as closely as we could. We anticipate, I guess if we have any squishiness in it, it is anticipation of our church's wider mission. Part of the process of asking the annual gathering to approve the budget is also a commitment to supporting it. And so I think that would be the only area that I would say has got some squishy in it.
And the budget is a plan. So we watch it very carefully. As I mentioned earlier, we have a policy in the conference on checks over a certain amount have to be signed and approved by council. Ernie has, does a very good job of matching things up before they're paid and asking questions and not paying them if he's not sure. We has been as diligent as we can in monitoring the budget, and we talk finances once a month with FAB, which is held the third week of each month intentionally, so that by that point we have the financial numbers. And then the council meets on the third Saturday of each month after FAB is met, so that we're making sure that we look at the recommendations at FAB, which is the finance and business part of the church. That's the part of the church committee that handles finances, and they have to make recommendations to us. So once a budget is approved, it's the plan, but it doesn't mean the money's necessarily been spent. We're monitoring income and expenses every month.
Christine says that information is helpful. So thank you for clarifying those questions. I am not seeing any further questions at the moment, panelists.
Christine, you're right. It's not a Bible, it's a budget. I like that.
Well, I want to thank everyone for coming and being part of this conversation about our conference finances. We're deeply committed to transparency and are doing all we can to try to make that information available to answer all the questions that come up. We will be reviewing the questions and feedback that we get from the website and we'll be back in touch with those who have asked those questions. It might take us a little bit of time, but we will get to those and have that resolved. I think the next things on our agenda tomorrow morning, there will be another morning intention setting meditation. And then in the afternoon, we'll be doing the first half of our business meeting. And then tomorrow evening, you'll want to make sure to tune in and join David Holston on his front porch for some open and informal conversation. Ernie, Keith, David, or is there anything else that you would like to say in closing tonight?
No, I just want to point out again, this is something we've not done in the past, and we thought it was important to do it this year, is to have a separate discussion and panel on finances, to spend as much time as we could answering questions and being as transparent as we can. It's something I think we'll probably try to do in the future as well. And we're very open about the fact that we don't always agree on everything, because we don't. We're still learning and doing, you know, we're people like everybody else trying to make the best decisions. I very much appreciate the questions. It's nice to have 35 comments and or questions in the Q&A session. It's nice to have 76 people on a call like this. So I'm encouraged by seeing the interest that is out there.
One question that was just asked, will the questions be saved for our review later?
The questions have all been spoken aloud, and so the whole event will be recorded. And if you want to review, you're welcome to review the recording. You can, of course, fast forward through it if you remember the answers to certain pieces. I want to thank all of you for coming out and being part of this important conversation. I wish you a wonderful evening, good rest, and to come back together tomorrow, because it is together that we're stronger. Grateful for being in ministry with you. Thank you, Ernie. Thank you, David, for being panelists. Appreciate you, Eric and John, for being our tech hosts tonight. I wish you all a good night.